guys, today I want to talk with you about Fierce Kingdom, a thriller written by Jen Phillips that was published in 2017. Now, if you haven't heard about this book before, then do not beat yourself up. I haven't either. While I'm sure that this novel at the time reached its designated audience, it doesn't seem like it made it big. As per usual, we will start this video with a short synopsis and then proceed to the non-spoiler review and wrap this video up with the spoilers. If you haven't read Fierce Kingdom yet, but are debating to do so, then do not worry. I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. In Fierce Kingdom, we follow a woman named Joanne, a wife, a mother, and a simple, down-to-earth, could be you or your neighbor kind of a person. We follow her and her 4-year-old son as they wrap up a nearly perfect and relaxing day at the local zoo. Zoo is Lincoln's, Joanne's son's, safe place. He loves visiting it and seeing the animals often enough that Joanne herself knows the zoo as well as the back of her own hand. However, when the time for the zoo to close comes and Joanne starts rushing to the exit gate, she feels a change in the air. Something is not as it always is. And soon enough, she ends up face to face with a terrifying image. Multiple dead bodies and armed men who have come to the zoo to hunt. If you have been on my channel before, then as soon as you clicked on this video and saw me pouring wine, you should have known that Fierce Kingdom was not a book I enjoyed. It wasn't the worst book I have read last year, but it is safe to say that it has been the worst thriller. And that's mostly because this novel is not actually a thriller. Now, I don't know what it is, but for it to be a thriller, I needed to feel at least a drop of suspense. Fierce Kingdom starts with an intriguing premise, but so very quickly loses momentum, leaving its reader unsatisfied by the end. This setup promises to take us into an intense, high-stakes, live-or-die situation, but the execution of it falls flat. Now imagine it yourself for a second. You are locked in, with no place to actually hide, no way out, no food or water that you can easily access, and you are being hunted for sport by psychopaths with guns who have already killed multiple people and will not hesitate to kill you too. It's terrifying. And now add to this situation a 4-year-old child who doesn't understand the extent of the danger you both are into, who doesn't realize just how quiet you need to be, who needs constant entertainment, and who slows you down at every turn. It's the kind of situation that all of us could imagine ourselves ending up in, and that alone should make the story captivating. And yet, I felt nothing. No fear, no tension, no worry for our characters. The closest thing to a feeling I could muster reading this novel was boredom. I think that one of the major issues of Fierce Kingdom is the pacing. The novel begins with a burst of adrenaline as Joanne realizes the danger she is in and rushes to protect her child. However, after this initial sudden tension, the plot nearly stops. Much of the book is spent with Joanne hiding, reflecting on motherhood, and internally debating her next move, which slows the story to a crawl. While there's nothing inherently bad about a character taking its time to process what is happening in their own head, here those never-ending thoughts felt repetitive and disruptive to the sense of urgency that we should be feeling. As a result, that suspense that should have been the backbone of the thriller becomes diluted, and you as the reader end up feeling disconnected from the action. While reading Fierce Kingdom, I kept on remembering The Long Walk by Stephen King, a book in which people live within a dystopian world and where 16-year-old boys are invited to volunteer for a walk, a race of a sort. 100 boys need to start walking from the same point, following a certain pace, and continue to walk until only one of them is left standing. A very simple premise that I expected to be relatively boring, but I took a chance on it solely because it was Stephen King who wrote it and ended up fascinated by the book. Nothing else really happened plot-wise within that story. We simply followed 100 boys walking. We observed their inner thoughts, conversations, fears, and feelings, and still, these characters were captivating. Meanwhile, in Fierce Kingdom, our protagonist Joanne just seems frustratingly passive for the majority of the book. And while I understand that her fear and paralysis is a very realistic portrayal of how one might feel in a situation like this, it eventually becomes exhausting to read about. The novel, instead of the imminent danger, seems to be more focused on Joanne's internal monologue about motherhood. And while there's nothing inherently bad with that, I am not a mom, and I honestly do not care about Lincoln's developmental stages. If I wanted to read a book about the struggles and rewards of motherhood, then I would have looked for a novel about the struggles and rewards of motherhood. I wouldn't have gone for a suspense thriller. Actually, now that I think about it, A Room by Emma Donoghue is a great example of how one can deliver a spine-chilling story that keeps you on your toes and still puts motherhood and the need to protect and care for your child in the front and center of it. Anyhow, it's not only Joanne that I felt to be a disappointing character. I couldn't stand her son, Lincoln, either. And I know that might sound harsh when I talk about a 4-year-old, but he doesn't feel like he is 4 in this book. He's overly precautious for his age, which strains believability, especially in such a traumatic situation. And while yes, all children are different, after I was done with Fierce Kingdom, I sat down to discuss it with my sister, who is a mom of a 5 and a 3-year-old, and she almost instantly pointed out how Lincoln just doesn't feel like a child, and how that one detail instantly took her out of the story. All in all, I feel like I have been talking for a while already about a book where nothing really happens, nor anything really matters. It's a pity, honestly, because the premise of the story sounded pretty damn great. That being said, let's move to the spoiler review to talk a little bit more about the characters and the ending of the book. I guess one of the biggest deal breakers for me in this book was Joanne herself. Maybe I would have been able to look differently at the lack of suspense or action if at least I had found the protagonist of the novel to be interesting. Joanne, however, is a very unlikable character. She is rude to everyone, for no good reason. Like the young girl who invited Joanne and Lincoln to hide with them, or the teacher. There was no need to be this abrasive or judgmental, especially when they are helping you and when your kid is the reason you are all in danger right now. Even the way Joanna was talking with her husband felt standoffish. Instead of asking her husband for help or for information or trying to let him know that she and his son are okay, she just wanted to get him off her back as fast as possible. There was no connection between this married and supposedly happy couple. Now, of course, people react differently in high-stress situations, and there's no way for me to know how I would react, but I honestly can't imagine that I would want to ignore my husband. I feel like, if anything, if I would be in a good hiding spot the way Joanne was, I would be lashing onto my husband for some moral support, just to keep my sanity. Honestly, at times it almost felt like Joanne has some sort of superiority complex. Like she believes that she is a better mother, a better human even than those around her. I think that one of the very few scenes that I actually found intriguing and that showed off Joanna's character best is the scene where she found a baby stuffed into a garbage container. You follow along as Joanne gets outraged by the idea of someone being such a bad mom and leaving the baby behind without even thinking that maybe leaving that baby behind was the hardest decision that person had to make, but they had to do it in order to survive. And it's not like the baby was dropped in the middle of the road. No, they were carefully placed in a good hiding spot where the speaker could drown out the baby's cries. And we don't even know, maybe the parent of said baby is currently hiding somewhere where they can observe the trash container at all times. That way, keeping an eye of the situation and simultaneously increasing both of their chances of survival. And even after she ends up outraged for finding the baby, she simply leaves without trying to help or take the baby with her. as she should have done. That baby right now is not her problem. Saving herself and her son should be her only priority, which is fine. Being hypocritical about this whole situation, though, isn't. Overall, all through the novel, I couldn't decide if Joanne is smart or stupid. I guess she was smart to use her knowledge of the zoo to her advantage, but at the same time, so very stupid for throwing her phone away in order to distract the men with the guns. Like, throw anything else. A purse, your shoe, anything. Your phone is your only lifeline to the real world. It's the only way you can see the news, call the police, text your husband, let emergency people know as much information as possible. I would have understood if she had run out of battery, but no. She just decided that she doesn't need it anymore. By the end of the book, I was rooting for Joanne to die. I kept on saying to myself that this is a 2-star read, but if the author commits and kills one of the main characters, then I will give it an extra star without a moment's hesitation. Truth be told, because I couldn't stand Joanne, my favorite chapters of the book were the ones written from any other POV. Then at least we got to see something happening. Unfortunately, those chapters were few and far between. And as for the other characters in the novel, well, there's nothing really to say there. Sure, more characters were introduced, though they all felt underdeveloped and their contributions to the plot were minimal. Overall, I can't even say that I was a fan of the ending of the novel. As I have mentioned before, both of our main characters surviving and not even being actually injured despite running face to face into our bad guys felt like serious plot armor. Also, the ending was incredibly predictable. I honestly would like to know if there were any people who believed that, first, Lincoln would stay in the place his mom left him, and second, that he was actually dead after Joanne couldn't find him. That scene was not suspenseful, it was eye-roll inducing. I don't even know what else here to say. The sticker on my copy of the book says that this is supposed to be the thriller of the month. And I'll just have to assume that The Observer had a very slow month if they picked this. All in all, I do not want to judge the author solely on Fierce Kingdom. It wasn't the book for me for sure, but the overall writing style wasn't bad. So I guess I'll have to assume that Jen Phillips does know how to write, just as I'll have to assume that writing thrillers might not be her strong suit. But all of that is just my opinion. What about yours?